Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Communications and Conversations. I'm your host, John Crook. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Hey, thanks for tuning in to last week's episode. We had some great feedback on the presentation that I did at the Minnesota North Star Radio Conference. Sorry if I keep slaughtering that name. I've said it a few times here, but they had me present on there. We did the Do Now Network, which is the amateur radio network that I kind of designed, created, sponsored a little bit by JJK Communications, every kind of thing just across the board. So thank you for everybody that did that. We got a good show here today. We have basically we're going to talk about some licensing stuff is really kind of what it's going to boil down into about it today. We have lots of times that people don't really know the difference between licensure and the different types of license classes out there. And when I say license class, I don't mean like extra advanced or whatever. What I'm actually talking about is the different types of radio services and the licenses that are involved with it that a lot of people are not really aware of. There's a lot of things that people just don't know about. So I am here to talk about that today. And we got, I don't know how people know sometimes when I got stuff coming in here, but I'm receiving text messages all day today. But with that being said, we're going to talk about that today, and it's a presentation that I gave before, and I think you're going to enjoy it. And I got a lot of good feedback on there. And like I said, after last week's episode, people said, "Hey, John, we really liked it on the educational side. We really enjoy it when you do some of the educational material because it's kind of presented as here's what it is. Let's talk about this." And they said, could you do another episode? And I said, you know what? Sure, why not? Let's do another episode. So before we do that, let's take a moment to thank our sponsor, JJK Communications. JJK Communications does support Communications and Conversations. They are the ones that help us with this equipment and all this kind of fun stuff on there and get us the toys and stuff we play with and what it is, and let us travel out to some of the sites and do a couple things like that on there. So without the support of JJK Communications, we could not do Communications and Conversations. Communications and Conversations, if you notice, we're not asking for buy me a coffee. We're not asking you to do Patreon. We're not asking for any of that whatsoever. We've never asked for any money. We don't ever want to ask for any money. But in turn, we do need some sponsorships because things do cost money. And while I would love to be able to just buy things and do a show like that, it does come down to that. So JJK Communications does help us sponsor it. In turn, guess what we're saying? Hey, sponsor JJK Communications. And actually, JJK Communications has a really cool deal this month. They're doing what they now call a Radio of the Month, an ROTM. So Radio of the Month here. If you check them out on their social media page, you will find out that the Redivis Alliance, or Luance as some people will pronounce it, H1 dual band DMR handheld radio is one of their specials of the month, Radio of the Month. And the Redivis HA1G. That's right, the HA1G. It is a GMRS handheld that comes preloaded with your standard 30 GMRS channels. Alrighty, that's the standard 22 FRS channels and then the 8 repeater channels on top of it. But in addition to that, not only can it do those channels, you can program your own GMR combination of repeaters and frequencies and stuff in there to make it even more easily granular on there, is the kind of way I described it. I played with one of these, and it's kind of a cool little radio. I mean, it's just a GMRS radio. It's built tough. It comes in either black or like a fluorescent green. And a lot of people like it. Those radios, the HA1G and the H1 dual band DMR handheld, are the radios of the month from JJK Communications. The Radio of the Month special, they can't talk about pricing because what they're offering you to is well below what you can get from other sources, other dealers out online, and therefore they can't advertise it. But if you want to email them, you can email them, sales@jjkcom.com. That's right. I'm going to move my head over here. Instead of replace that www there and put sales@jjkcom.com. They will tell you the pricing on these things. Now, the radio of the month goes through the end of business on October 31st. So you still have time if you want to get the radio of the month here. Supplies are limited. They said they only got a few of the models left. They've been selling out of them left and right. But head on over to JJK Communications, jjkcom.com, or visit them on social media. Or once again, give them a call or email them. They'll be more than happy to tell you about the radio of the month special ending here next week for October. Alrighty, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode, and we're going to call it Communications 101. And the reason we're calling it Communications 101 is because, once again, it's kind of like a communications primer for sake of another thing. It's a primer, it's a review, it's an education, and in the different forms of two-way communications that are out there today. So everything that's out there and that people use on a regular basis is actually falls into a type or category, we'll say, of communications. And that's where this whole presentation here, this class, if you will, is going to play on it today. So the first and foremost part, look at all those beautiful lights flashing there. It's sort of like, look, moth, right, for blight. But what are we going to talk about? So the reason I say why we're here, we're going to talk about it a little bit here. We're going to talk about licenses. So that's the biggest thing, licenses. And a lot of people think of licenses, you pay money, do this, but there are different types of licenses out there. We're going to talk about some different technologies because people don't understand there's different technologies out there. Back in the day, radio was this, a lot of people thought radio was, what do you want to say? Just pick a radio, pick a channel and go, right? No, there's different technologies now involved with it. And we're going to finally talk about starting out. How can you start out and how can you get started? So, a little bit about my presentation self. So people understand a few things. And I love to make fun of myself. I actually had a person that made this for me. So I go by N9UPC. I go by WRME 848, which is my GMRS license. I go by PG 003-34626. That's my general radio operator's license. I have a marine permit. MP 000-23209. So marine permits are needed for operating radios in certain class vessels, or if you're going to go ahead and operate on them. Obviously, I am the owner of JJK Communications, but I also have different things on there. I'm a community care, critical care field supervisor, paramedic, and then also I'm the owner of the amateur radio network known as the Do Now Network, the Digital User Network of Wisconsin, which, if you're looking for a presentation on that, go back over to last week's episode. Now, what are the main points of discussion tonight? And I shouldn't say tonight, today. It's depending on when you're watching this. So what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the type of licenses. So this is what I said, type of licenses. We have license by exam, license by fee, and license by usage. So they're license classes, but some require an exam, some require money, and some are just saying, okay, it's technically you're operating under a general license, and you don't need to pay or take a test for it. We're going to talk about the different digital technologies on there. So you see there's analog signal, there's digital signaling, there's a lot of different things that go into signaling out there. And then basically how or what you need to get started in these things. And that is going to be, I think, the biggest thing here is a lot of people don't realize that it's not that hard to get started in some of this stuff, but you do have to have a starting point on there. So types of licenses. Once again, I said license by exam, license by fee, license by usage. Let's dive into them here. So types of licenses, we got 3 different licenses that are underneath what we call the ECFR 47. So ECFR stands for Electronic Code of Federal Regulations. These are regulations put out by the federal government, and they're built into kind of a different sets of regulations. And then underneath the code, let's say, you're going to have different parts of it. And I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to talk here, so I'm going to take a drink every once in a while. My apologies. But there's different ones. So Part 80 of 47 CFR deals with marine band usage. So everything in Part 80 of EFCR, or ECFR, 47, deals with marine band radios, marine band only, you're not going to find anything about amateur. You're not going to find about business. You're not going to find anything whatsoever. Part 90 deals with land mobile radio services. This is more of your commercial line of stuff. Okay, this is your business radios. This is your public safety radios. These are things that are certain more so of saying, okay, here's what it is. You don't have a set of channels. Like Marine Band, you have a set of Marine channels. All right, channels 1 through whatever, okay? Depends on if you're doing international and U.S., whatever. Part 90 says, no, we're going to deal with the frequency itself. We're putting that pin on the map, and then so much around that pin is where you can operate. Part 95 deals with personal radio services. These are going to be like your MERS, your FRS, your GMRS, your CB radio, those kind of things. That's Part 95. And Part 97 deals with amateur radio. Now, this is where some of the other people will disagree. Alrighty. Part 97 doesn't specifically use frequencies. It talks more so about frequency privileges, what goes into transmitters, those kind of things. And Part 97 is more of your amateur radio, like it says in there, amateur radio services. And amateur radio allows you to operate by license class on certain bands on there, but in turn, the Part 97 rules only allow certain radio frequency privileges. And when radios are designed for that, while there's not technically a Part 97 certification, the radios are designed for 97 frequency usages also. All right, there's some people that are saying there's no Part 97 regulations. No, there's not. There's not necessarily an FCC ID that says Part 97 on there, but when they're designed for amateur radio, they are designed to operate within the Part 97 rules. And we'll probably have another episode on that because a lot of people get confused about that. They think I can buy an amateur radio modified and use it. No, it can't, because Part 90 has different rules. Part 95 has different rules. And there. So some of these parts that we're going to talk about are just like a baseline understanding of how the type of licenses fall into there. So just kind of think about that from there. Just we're doing that. So now let's jump into the first type of license. We call this license by exam. This is any sort of license for usage that requires you to take an exam. Now let me stop there. This may say, okay, you have to take an exam to be able to get a license. That may say you have to pay for the exam, or it may say you may have to pay a fee in addition to taking the exam. Either way, you have to take a test. Whether you just take the test, pay for the test, and you're done, or you take the test, may have to pay for the test, and then you have to pay the FCC to issue you that license because you successfully passed that exam. So just be advised on there. Usually licenses by exam allow you to operate within a certain frequency range, frequency band, or within some sort of definition of what the license is going to entail. So that's where it gets kind of like in that muddy kind of thing. The biggest and common one is like amateur radio. Amateur radio, you have to take an exam and successfully complete the exam to be able to operate as an amateur radio operator. You also have to pay a $35 fee to the FCC in this case, but that allows you to saying, okay, if you take the technician exam, you can operate on these frequency privileges. If you take the general exam or element, you can operate on these certain frequencies. Just because you take the exam does not give you extra privileges that you can use all the amateur frequencies. No, that's where it's licensed by exam, gives you a certain definition of frequencies, as well as have to pay a fee for it. Now we have license by fee. Now what license by fee means is that it says you go and give the government your money, in turn fill out an application for what you want, and then if they approve it, then in turn they say, okay, here you go. This is what we're going to do. You're going to go ahead, give us your money, and this money will give you a license for usually 10 years, usually. And then in that case, you can operate on these frequencies or these principles. So a lot of this is like LMR radio. So if you have like a group that has their own licensed frequencies, like church groups, businesses, JJK Communications, right? They pay for frequencies to be used for their purpose. And it's usually a geographical reason or purpose, or or to a degree, it gives you specific principles of operation. So while we think of business and commercial and LMR and specialized mobile relay and public safety and all that kind of stuff, another one that kind of falls into this category is GMRS. So in this case, GMRS also falls in here. So what happens with GMRS is you pay your $35. It's good for 10 years. The license covers X amount of people, like within your family, how they have some rules and designations. But you can use the FRS channels. You can use the GMRS channels, but there's certain limitations, right? You can put up your own repeater, but the repeater has to be this. You can use a handheld, which could be this much wattage, a mobile, which can only be this much wattage. You can use GMRS frequencies anywhere within the United States, but once again, there's restrictions. Commercial are a little different. There are nationwide frequencies, there's regional frequencies, and there's a lot of local specific frequencies where we look on a map and we put a pin in the map, and you can only use a frequency within so many kilometers of that operational area. So that's license by fee. And finally, we have license by usage. So license by usage is saying, okay, when you are purchasing this radio, you are agreeing to operating in certain aspects and privileges of the frequencies programmed into the radio without a license. So, for example, you buy a MERS radio. MERS has 5 VHF frequencies. Maximum wattage is 2 watts. All right, so a MERS radio has to be built to the specs of saying you can only operate on the 5 specific frequencies at 2 watts maximum, and the radios have some different definitions and stuff. So in turn, when you buy a MERS radio, that's your authorization to automatically use it. CB radios, you buy a CB radio, you don't have to get a license for CB radio anymore. You used to have to, but you don't. Now what happens is you buy in a CB radio, in essence, by you purchasing it, you agree that you can use this radio, and you will agree that you use it with certain limitations and restrictions. Lots of times when you have a license by usage or frequencies that are part of license by usage, they are on a shared frequency basis. So, for example, FRS radios. If you go ahead and listen to FRS, FRS is used anywhere. Mom, dad, kids, brothers, sisters, businesses. I don't know why people do, but I hear some security officers using it. It's ridiculous, right? But those are all shared frequencies. If I'm on channel 3 and someone else is on channel 3, and I can't intentionally interfere with them, but if one of us is saying, "Hey, we're getting interference, let's go to another channel," then what do? They change the channel, but it's shared channels, right? There's no "this is my frequency" on there. All right, let's talk a little bit about technology, because technology plays a lot into this. Technology plays a part of going ahead and saying some frequencies, some licenses, some parts of the ECFR 47 and the different parts underneath it are saying, yeah, you can use analog, you can use digital, you can use analog only. There's some that are even going and contemplating, there's like going to full digital, that if you want to use certain frequencies, you can only use it in a digital concept. So we're going to talk a little bit about the digital modes on there. So let's understand difference between analog and digital. Analog is sometimes considered traditional voice. It's been around since the dawn of time. Whether it's FM, AM, single sideband, analog voice. You do not need any sort of component or an encoder, vocoder, decoder, something like that to do it. Analog is still around today. As a matter of fact, some license classes or some types of licenses say only FM. All right, example, GMRS, FRS, MERS, all right, CB. You can't run any sort of digital voice on there. It can only be FM analog voice. Digital offers now more features. It's built into technology because digital changes it to ones and zeros. It's no longer a waveform. You're restricted to what you can put in a waveform. But when you put it in digital data, your voice is converted to data. Data sent down. Data can be mixed with things. It's becoming very popular. Lots of digital usage stuff is starting to become more and more popular. Prices of the digital stuff is coming down, right? When you're in technology and you want to be on the cutting edge, you're going to have to bleed a little bit, right? Because your pocketbook's going to bleed. You're going to bleed because of trials and tribulations, whatever the case may be. Digital does offer an advantage of frequency efficiency. So with digital, data can go in a much smaller band space than voice. Analog is cost effective and doesn't present interoperability issues. So I got an analog radio, you got an analog radio. We can talk. I have a digital mode A, you have a digital mode B radio. We can't talk to one another because they don't do that without some other helps on there. But once again, what you might be using for digital B, I might be using for digital A mode, we may be able to fit in that same space that there's only the ability to do FM. All right, let's kind of do an understanding here. Analog, think of it as a countrywide road here, right? It's a dirt road, countrywide, no lanes, no nothing. We're just putting a signal down that road there, all right? Now let's go and look at what we're going to do next. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to do digital. So digital, now as we kind of start to go into more refined analog, we start moving into digital. Now we're moving it to like a blacktop. Now we're putting lanes. So now we're defining things a little bit more and more. But now as we come to digital, what we could do with that old country road is we blacktop it so we make it nice and smooth. All right? Crisp, clean signal. Say that 3 times. Now what we're doing also too is with digital, we can actually start to segment things. We can start doing these roads, these lanes, and we could start having conversations closer to one another. If we go back to that country road, there's no lanes. 2 trucks, 2 cars going down it. They might hit each other. They might bump one another, that kind of thing. But now with like a digital signal, this highway, clean, flat pavement roads with lanes, we could stay in our lane. I could stay here. You could stay there. I'm traveling down the road. You're traveling down the road. We're not interfering with one another. And we could start making more and more and more granular paths of traffic on a road in digital than we can with analog. So analog takes your voice, converts it to RF energy, boom, sends it out. Digital takes in your voice, passes it through what we call a vocoder. And a vocoder basically takes and encodes your voice into a data stream, converts it to RF energy, sends it out over the air. Analog uses a waveform, so you could put a CTCSS or what they call PL tone or a DCS or a DPL tone into it and embed it into that signal waveform so you will only hear the other users you want to hear. It's not encryption. I, as a scanner listener, can hear it, but my radio can filter out the other noise. Digital, it 1s and 0s. Doesn't have a waveform. So it uses dits and bits on there to send out to who we need it to. Analog, signal clarity is going to decrease steadily until the signal is unusable. So it's going to start to go ahead and get down if we do a downward angle, and it starts to get in more and more until we get to the point where we're like, that's what you're hearing, right? You're hearing static. You're hearing like a hiss noise because my audio is not quite breaking through. Digital is more like a cliff. It's going until it hits that cliff, and then the signal drops, and then the quality drops. So what may end up happening is you go and you're going along, and you're like, hey, how you doing, Bob? And then it just, boom, it's gone. Now, advantages and disadvantages to analog and digital. Once again, analog, simple, easy to use to convert your voice and send it out over the air. Very simple waveform. Use a CTCS, DCS, PL, DPL, all that in there. Clarity goes on a steady decline. But once again, analog is easy. There's a lot of analog radios. However, digital does require a vocoder. But then when it changes it to a vocoder, guess what? You can put more data in there. You can put GPS data. You can put call signs. You can put you can send messages to one another. You can do status checks. You do all these kind of things on there. And then the level of quality on a voice signal just goes a lot further, because where analog might be having, hey, this is John here, and I'm just around the road here, where it may sound like that. Where what would happen with digital is just like, hey, this is John. I'm traveling down a road here, and then it just kind of will fade out like that. But you have that. So is one better than the other? That's going to be subjective versus objective. That's tomato. There's really no definitive information on there like that. Alrighty. Digital requires modulation, format, and protocol to send the data. Requires a way for the format and the protocol to travel down the frequency. Okay, so you have to have formats to do it. A vocoder stands for voice, encoder, and decoder. Now, yes, DVSI holds a lot of the patents on these vocoders. People say proprietary technology and this whole thing. I'm not going to get into that because guess what? Yes, you could say that's proprietary because you have to buy the DVSI chip. BS, because there's other things out there. There's computer programs now that will decode it and encode it. So that whole, it's proprietary because you need a vocoder thing is weak. It's like an 80-year-old P stream. Okay, it's very weak in there. Alrighty. Now, the common digital voice formats that are out there actually today for two-way radio voice is C4FM, which is continuous 4-frequency modulation, and that's like P25, Fusion, NextN. There's 4FSK, which is like what DMR uses, and there's GMSK, which is like what D-Star uses. They all use the AMB+2 vocoder chip. So the vocoder chip can handle the different voice data formats, but you have to choose one to do it. C4FM is not compatible with 4FSK, which is not compatible with GMSK. So there's a couple of different variances in there. Once again, that's where people saying, "Oh, that's why digital is a problem. There's not compatibility." No, that's a weak argument. Okay, it's a weak argument. There's different ways to come over that. All right, data transmissions. We're going to talk about FDMA. So FDMA stands for Frequency Division Multiple Access. It's used by P25. It's used by Yaesu System Fusion, NextN, D-Star, and M17. And what we're talking about here is not what vocoders use the format, the type of car. We're saying how we divide the lanes. And with FDMA, we're dividing the lanes down a frequency like car lanes. It goes like that. It's like a lane that you just send that signal down on there. Next one is TDMA. Now, TDMA is what is used. It stands for Time Division Multiple Access, and is what is used by DMR. And what that does is, instead of like FDMA saying, here's the lanes of the road, we're now going to space it out by the cars. So we're going to make sure that there's cars that can equally fit down the road. And we create a slot. So in other words, if we're thinking of a car lane, right, we're going and saying, okay, there's a car lane here. So the car in that lane, the car length is 12 foot. So every 12 feet, I'm going to create like a car spot. And then we're all traveling down the road in unison. Where FDMA is like, nope, we're just making as many lanes as we can. So it's kind of slices it. They say like slices it to 12.5 kilohertz bandwidth into 2 slots is really kind of what it does on there. That's where it comes in time slots. But when you're using TDMA, your radio is actually keying and unkeying every 30 milliseconds. So that's why if you ever listen to DMR on a scanner, an analog scanner, you're going to hear like that, like a clicking noise because it's keying on and off. Where at FDMA, you're just going to hear the data noise like ooh or whatever the data you're listening to is on there. Now, the other one that is out there is CDMA. Now, CDMA is used a lot by cellular companies, very big with like Verizon, Sprint, and everything like that on there. What that is that's carrier division multiple access, and what it does is the carrier allows for the better frequency utilization because it doesn't do time slots, it doesn't do like road slots and on there, but what it does is it kind of mixes and matches and allows for full duplex communication that takes place. So like FDMA, the lane can either you're transmitting or receiving down that lane, where CDMA kind of starts to combine it all for full duplex type communications. Once again, I bring it up because CDMA, you're like, well, there's FDMA and TDMA. Didn't Verizon have CDMA or something? Yeah, it did. But that's usually more of a cellular thing. But the main two things in the two-way radio world are FDMA and TDMA. So how do you get started in this? This is the big question. How do you get started in all this? So first of all, as I say, to whom are you speaking to? And what you're going to determine is the people you need to communicate with in the situation. All righty? Will they be on site, in building? Are you going to do it? Like, are you in like an auditorium, a school? Are you in like a park? Where are you at? Are you talking locally? Are you talking multiple miles on there? I mean, are you going to be able to get by with just a small handheld radio, or are you going to need to kick up the power? What do you need to do in this case? Now, based off that first question that I just said here, let's take a look at the license to be able to help facilitate that. And the different licenses, remember we talked by license by exam, license by fee, license by usage. All those fit into different things. So, for example, amateur radio, yeah, you got to take a test and then pay a fee for it, but amateur radio is for hobby communications and fun communications. You can't conduct a business on there. But now if you need to conduct business on there, you could do license by fee, and you can conduct business on there, but or like GMRS or something. But then there's certain restrictions on what you can and can't talk about in there, and more so, who can and can't get a license. So if you are wanting to just talk amongst your family, you can't go to the FCC and just get an FCC license. You can't. You really can't. Like, business licenses are designed for businesses to be able to communicate. Now, the next thing is that you got to make sure you obtain proper licensure for the parties involved. So, for example, a GMR license is going to cover, like in my house, it will cover me, it will cover my wife, it will cover my kids, it will cover my parents, it will cover my wife's parents, and, my kids live with me now, but let's say they didn't, it would cover them. That's kind of like the whole encompassing of a GMRS license. Whereas an amateur license, for example, is only going to cover me, and then other people I talk to are going to have their own amateur radio license. Where we're talking like a business communication license, like a business LMR license, that is a license to a person, and that person can let anybody, or depending on the situation, do it on there. So, for example, as a business, you may license that frequency for business communications, and whoever works for your business or does business stuff for you could use that license in that specific area, or the terms or restrictions of the license. Where, once again, you're not going to necessarily get a business license to have all your friends talk on it. That's not the whole point of a business license. Business license is for doing business. Hobby license, amateur license for doing hobby type activity. GMRS or FRS, Family Radio Service, those licenses are designed for family communications. Do some of the stuff overlap? Yes, right? So GMRS, you could do some business on there. It's very limited restriction to what you could do. FRS, you could do a ton of businesses on there. I know businesses all over the place that use FRS radios. It is so funny. I go to Mall of America. We're coming up here into the wintertime, which is going to be shopping season. Mall of America, so many businesses use FRS frequencies, it's not even funny. And then they don't even know. Like, I'll sit in the food court, and I'll hear 4 or 5 businesses on an FRS channel. I'm like, wow, that's funny. And they're talking like they think they're encrypted. Like, hey, Bonnie, I got a customer up here who thinks that they're right with the sale and da-da-da-da-da. I honest to God, I can go to Mall of America, sit all day long with a scanner, and just listen to the stuff and laugh on there. And by the way, they can't do anything about it. Alrighty. As this part's called, that's the pretty radio you has. So make sure you're using the correct radio for the right service. Purchase a radio designed and licensed for the purpose, right? Don't buy an amateur radio and modify it for business. It's not going to work properly. Business licenses have certain specifications. They have to be able to transmit on a certain frequency band. They have to do a certain frequency steps. They have to do these things. Amateur radios don't necessarily meet those frequency steps or requirements on there. They're not designed for those frequencies. GMRS, for an example, you can buy GMRS-based radios that meet the Part 95 certification that are GMRS only, or you can buy radios that are Part 90 certified, which actually cover the Part 90 certification. As a matter of fact, you could buy a Part 90 radio that actually covers the amateur bands, because that's legal to do, right? A Part 90 certification will cover multiple. So that's why some people use like a Motorola or EF Johnson or a Kenwood commercial type radio on amateur bands, because it's legal to do that. But it's not legal to do the other way. You can't just open up a radio and modify it to operate in a band that it's not supposed to. You really can't. And there's horrible stories out there of some people being dicks about it that have done that and screwed with fire communications, law enforcement communications, public safety communications. Or they're just dicks. I mean, like firefighters that like, I want my own radio, and they do that. As a matter of fact, we're going to do an episode on scanners and encryption coming up here. But it's that case in point that is causing more and more systems to go digital, trunked, and encrypted. Okay, not just digital, not just trunked, but digital, trunked, encrypted. Because people are doing stupid moves like that. Once again, we'll do that. Next thing, ensure your radio meets the communications operations. Alrighty? If you're in the same building, you may be able to get by with like a 2-watt radio. But if you are starting to talk further away, like you got to talk outside the building, you got to talk miles away and stuff, make sure you're going to do it. Handheld is not going to reach more than maybe a mile away from one another with a high gain antenna, 5 watts, those kind of things, 4 watts. You're kind of pushing the limit there. right? But if you need to be able to talk much further distances, you're probably going to have a mobile radio to talk into another mobile radio, or you might have to have a base radio to a mobile radio, whatever the case may be. But make sure you're doing that. I hear so many horror stories of people going like, well, I went along and I bought the bubble pack at Walmart of the radios, and I got little kids on there talking to me, and I don't want little kids talking to me, and I can't get anywhere with these radios. Well, correct. You can't, because they're low power radios on shared frequencies. If you need radios for your business, don't buy these Midland or Cobra business radios, right? Don't buy them because of, they're business. No, they're FRS, GMRS, MERS radios. If you are a business and you need business communications for your business only, then by all means, buy a business radio. Business radios, once again, allow you to have higher power, allow you to have even repeaters if you want, but can do digital voice modes if you want to, can even do encryption. All right? I know of a tow company that got in trouble years ago in Wisconsin. I'm talking years ago. And even the state patrol used to do it. It was how stupid it is, right? Before, they used to take credit cards. So the state patrol used to go ahead and if you got a speeding ticket and you had to pay your post in the state of Wisconsin, they didn't have encryption. They would just go ahead and be like, 724 or 601 or 625 Eau Claire, blah, 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 blah. And what they would do is they would say authorization, and they read a series of numbers. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I'm sitting there listening one day. I'm like, you know what? They're giving credit card numbers right over the two-way radio, unencrypted. And I was like, Jesus Lord. Same thing with the tow company. Tow company, I was listening to. They thought they were on an 800 megahertz trunked system. And then they'd go ahead and be like, yeah, we got this one here. She needs to pick up. It's the customer's name. And the card number is going to be 4425678. It's just like, oh my God. Oh my God. And now you can encrypt it. You can do these things. But make sure you got the right type of radio. Didn't mean to get off on a tangent, but hey, whatever. All right. Your radios need TLC too. I will tell you, people start out and they say, oh, the radios work great. They're amazing. And then what ends up happening is after a while, they're like, these radios are crap. I can't believe it. And da-da-da-da-da-da. And you know what it is? It's simple things. I'll never forget working in the two-way radio world professionally. I won't say the name of the customer I had or anything, but it was a store security kind of customer for a predominant, department store. Excuse me. What happened is that we put in a new repeater system for them in the store. Everything was working good. And they're like this and this. And then all of a sudden, after about a couple weeks, all of a sudden we get reports of, hey, we're having problems communicating. The repeater just isn't receiving well. So we're like, okay, so we go out there, check the repeater, check the antenna. Antenna's good, repeater's good, blah, blah, blah. We couldn't figure out what it is. We say, okay, but there's nothing wrong. We'd go ahead, test it. The manager tests it. Manager to floor staff, do you copy? Yeah, we copy you. Okay, let me go to the area that's having an issue. Okay, and he goes to the area that's having an issue. Hey, can you hear me okay? Yeah, we can hear you fine. Well, what ended up happening is that they were calling us back, and I said, okay, what's going on? You keep saying there's an issue there. So we're like, is it the time of day? Is someone jamming the frequency and stuff? No. What ended up happening was store security didn't like the longer UHF antenna poking them in their ribs, and then they would bend over the tip of the antenna and tape it. So what's happening is instead of the antennas designed to be up like this, it's folded over. And so it's folded over, and they're having trouble getting a repeater because it's folded over. Well, no kidding, Sherlock. You're basically cutting your antenna in half. So make sure the antennas are good. Next thing, make sure radios are updated on firmware. Radios are no longer radios. They're little computers, right? That's all they are. They're little computers. And when you have these little computers, especially in the digital world, firmware updates make the radio work better, add more features, do these kind of things. Firmware updates do need to be done. Motorola is classic about that. They pass out firmware updates and software updates like you wouldn't believe. Alrighty? But you need to keep those updates up there. That adage of, hey, don't fix it if it ain't broke, wrong, and no, bad juju out there. All right, this is the biggest one. Make sure you know how to operate your radio. right? Lots of radios have little bells and whistles and knobs and dials and buttons and blah, 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 right? Okay, make sure you know how to operate your radio. Okay, set up or get the radio set up for the features that you need. All righty. If you're not going to be if you're going to be dealing with analog radios and you don't need signaling, you don't need this and this and this and this, then that's fine. Don't set it up that way. Set up the basics. I've known working, like I said, through the ages, customer wanted an encrypted channel. Well, instead of having a button to turn encryption on and off, all we did was we made it easier. We changed it to a channel. So channel 1 was clear, encryption was channel 2. So instead of them pushing a button and this and this and this, they're like, nope, they just switched it to channel 2. Boom, it's good to go. So know how to operate your radio. Seriously, you got to know how to do it. So many people don't know how to do it, and then they're on the wrong channel. They're using this and this and this and this, and then that is super, super, super problematic on there. That's it. That's kind of it on that presentation. I wanna thank JJK Communications once again for sponsoring Communications and Conversations. Thank you for sponsoring this show and presentation on there. But as you see and can understand, that's where it kind of really runs down to. A lot of this stuff is basic stuff if you really think about it on there, but allows you to further understand what you're doing and what it gets into there. And the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask. People think it's a technology thing. Sometimes people think that it's like, I don't want to ask this question because I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to seem stupid. I don't want to do anything like that whatsoever. And then what ends up happening is they start to look stupid, or they do something very stupid in regards to it that actually gets them into trouble. And then now all of a sudden the next thing you know is they're like, well, what did I do? Why am I in trouble? Why is this? Well, you're in trouble because you didn't know how to operate, or you didn't do it within the law. And I'm going to tell you something. Don't be afraid to go and ask your radio provider for help. It's like JJK Communications. They not only sell it, they'll help you with education. They'll help you with everything that you need. If you don't know how to operate your stuff, then there's no sense in doing it. And unfortunately, there's not like radio classes. It's not like driving a car. You can't take a, radio class and then get a car. It's unfortunately, people think that everybody knows how to use a radio, and that's not the case. So as you hear the music and I'm looking at the time on the wall, we've been chatting along. Thank you for tuning in this presentation. I hope you like it. Also want to go ahead and say a great, great big thank you to the Recon Prepper. He subscribed to our channel this past week. Acknowledge it to him. If you're going to subscribe, keep an eye out for you. We're going to give you a salute on there. And thanks for following along our channel. Until then, everybody, from all of us here at Communications and Conversations, thank you very much. And guess what? I'll catch you on the radio sometime, I think.